Hello, and thank you for attending the 2020 Observer USG Candidates Debate. This will be our first time doing a debate over Zoom. Now that the university is facing an uncertain future because of both COVID-19 and President Barbara Snyder leaving, the student voice is more important than ever. So these elections are tremendously important, and I encourage all students to get involved. So we're going to talk to every position, both ones that are people running unopposed and ones where there's a race. And each candidate will first start off with a 1 to 2 minute long opening statement. First, the presidential candidates, Joey Kass and Hunter Stecko. Joey, you could start.
Hi, Matt. Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Joey Kass, your candidate for president. In my time at Case Western Reserve University, I've grown attached to this campus in a unique way as a transfer student. Involving myself in the undergraduate student government here has provided me with the opportunities to not only build relationships with and work alongside other passionately involved students, but help me to better connect myself with the student body. I currently serve as your Chief Judicial Officer, as well as the chair of the Allocations Committee. My time spent in USG has been filled with incredibly valuable experiences. I have listened to concerns from undergraduate students and learned how to effectively advocate for them in order to improve their crew experience. Crew's campus has certainly grown, both physically and virtually, this past year, and there are still aspects that I wish to improve upon as president. As your president, I will work tirelessly serving the students and leading USG through my platform of responsibility, community, accountability, and productivity. I believe in achieving several goals of this office: meaningfully connecting the student body to and inform them of their democratic student government and university administration, and better promote the work, passions, and efforts of our students and their organizations. The very nature of our democracy relies on an educated voting population, and as president, I find it to be my personal responsibility to ensure that those needs are met. To detail, rebuilding our community as we return to campus after being separated from this pandemic will be a priority of mine in the beginning months of the year. I will then work to continue a legacy of outreach and representation by empowering and elevating our organizations and our partners like UDC and RHA to accomplish our goals and set new, higher ones. My mission as president, simply, is to put students first and work toward a better crew experience for everyone.
Great, thank you for that. Hunter?
Yeah, thank you very much for hosting this debate. And really quickly, before I start, just one thing, wanted to take a quick moment to thank Joey. So as some of you may know, we are thankfully more colleagues, partners, and friends than we are opponents, and it's a privilege to share this Zoom stage, if not a physical stage, with him. So we currently find ourselves in the midst of a situation that just a few months ago, nobody would have fathomed. If anything, this has taught us now more than ever that it's difficult to tell what the future has to hold. Joey and I can both tell you, as the two in charge of the Student Activities Fee Emergency Fund, that the only thing that's certain, right now at least, is uncertainty. I've now had 3 years of experience in USG. I've served as a representative, a treasurer, and now vice president of finance. There are visions that I believe will truly address some of the issues that we've been dealing with for years. But for this opening statement, I want to hit on a few key points as to how together we will address the issues that come our way in a Stecko administration. Because as this year has taught us, we will never know exactly what the future has to hold. First and foremost, we will address problems with humility. That means coming to you for feedback via Zoom and other convenient means, and not just expecting you to come to us. That means working with our partners in UDC, RHA, and UPB to achieve your goals, like new housing and dining options. We'll work efficiently, making sure that the cooperation on the emergency fund that we've been able to build this semester, which is not just Joey and I's cooperation, but also cooperation with other campus organizations, does not fade, and making sure that those procedures are put in place so that we can efficiently help students in the future. Openness, listening to your suggestions, making sure that we are present for you and there all the time. Communication, pushing the administration of this university to communicate clearly with us, but also making sure that we're publicizing what we are doing and communicating clearly with others via brief communications that we can send out. And most importantly, whatever the future holds, we'll do it all together. Thank you.
All right, thank you both for that statement. So now, as you both mentioned, you're both involved in creating the USG Emergency Fund to deal with COVID-19. Hunter, in your letter of intent, you proposed creating a permanent fund to deal with future crises. Why do you think a permanent fund is necessary? And Joey, what is your opinion on the idea of a permanent emergency fund?
Yeah, so let me be clear about that. When I said a permanent emergency fund, I didn't mean keeping the money aside permanently. I actually don't think that that's a practical idea. My view is that the actual structure of the fund should be made permanent. So what I mean by that is, for example, when this semester came up, and I'll try to make this brief, we were able to collect money from different organizations based out of their budgets and things of that variety, and they were able to donate that to us. I was kind of more on the logistics side. Joey was kind of more on the fundraising side, so he really did a lot of that work. So that, I think, needs to be made permanent. The structure to be able to do that very quickly and efficiently again, and put this into place without having to do all of the startup work that we had to deal with in the beginning. I don't think that it would be a good idea to keep that money set aside, because I think that that money that comes from the student activities fee, I'm the vice president of finance for USG. This is like a big thing for me. The money that comes from this semester's students needs to be for the benefit of those students. And that's really at the heart of why we're doing what we're doing now, is because this money was not going to be for the benefit of this semester's students otherwise, but now it is.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Joey, is there anything you'd like to comment based on that?
I just would say that the reasons why I completely agree with Hunter, that the money can't exist there, frankly, because it can't. USG can't afford to give money to an emergency fund. Simply is not in their budget. UPB can't afford it as well. CUC can't afford it. There isn't enough money in the student activities fee for the students' activities. And I can tell you that confidently as the chair of the allocations committee, auditing all of those boards for the past 3 years. However, I would agree with Hunter that the framework that we set up so quickly with the tremendous amount of help that we had is hard to come by, and that by destroying all of that or essentially neglecting it would be a loss to the entire community. And so I'm absolutely in favor of keeping this framework, the setup in place, although there needs to be some sort of legislative action that would allow us to then put money into it should another emergency happen.
So create the precedent then for USG to put money into a similar emergency fund if something else were to happen in the future, but not having like a specific rainy day fund as a permanent part of the budget.
Correct.
Okay, great. Now, another issue with COVID-19, of course, has been what many students consider the university's lack of transparency, especially when it came to moving belonging out of students' dorms. So how do you plan on amplifying the student voice in future situations like this, and having the administration go to you first instead of you having to go to the administration when they are making these decisions? Joey, if you want to go first.
Okay, yeah, sure. I was like, okay. So to address the first question, I think a tremendous shift that we've seen in USG this past year has been in the volume of outreach. USG has sent out many more surveys than it has in the past, and that's certainly something I would want to continue. I've gotten a lot of positive feedback that students like the ease of filling out these online surveys, and I have to commend our current vice president of PR for doing a fantastic job with that and working with the executive committee. To continue that, I would also, like Hunter had mentioned in his opening statement, the opportunity that Zoom provides for our students. I've always thought it very impractical to walk from the top of the hill to Tink to meet with a USG officer in the USG office, or from North Side to Adelbert Hall to go to a General Assembly meeting. And I feel that in order to improve that student's voice to the administration, we first have to be more accessible ourselves. And if the administration is able to see how easily accessible they are, they in turn behave similarly. What you've seen now with these recent communications from President Snyder and the more broad university updates, not necessarily like specific this issue update, but I'm talking the video, for example, that all came from this resolution that I helped author that's going through the Student President's Roundtable, calling for administration to communicate with students. And as a matter of fact, the staff advisors that participate in these committees were able to here are the points being brought up in that resolution, and we're able to address it even before the resolution was passed. And that's when we started to see the administration becoming so much more involved. And so it's a matter of making our voices heard, but also providing a voice for the students.
All right, Hunter?
Yeah, yes, please. So I would definitely agree with Joey on the issue of utilizing Zoom and all of those ways to make us more accessible. As Joey said, that was something that I wrote in my letter of intent. I think that we definitely need to use those tools. And I do think that being more accessible to the student body and having the weight of the student body's voice behind us is something that's key and critical to making sure the administration takes us seriously. Kind of on kind of the nature of the question. I think that, if I'm being completely honest, I think that the administration is going to always have this tendency to think that they're making decisions with our interests in mind when that's not really necessarily the case. So I think really what we have to do is, so just a few days ago, myself and all of the fellow vice presidents, Sophie, Alex, Jasmine, Bids, and Marin, and myself were all on a call with Dick Jameson, with Lou Stark. Those individuals are vice presidents of the university who were key for a lot of these different things. And we communicated directly to them that we thought that the way they were doing things was not correct. And the way that they were communicating with the student body was not correct. And we told them what we wanted to see. And quite frankly, as much as I would like to say that we're going to be able to convince the administration to always come to us first, I do think that at times we're going to have to take the step of making sure that they know that we are dissatisfied with their communication when they are, because at the end of the day, this is a crisis. We're all going through a lot, and it might not always be the first thing in the admin's mind to come and consult us on a decision that in their minds they're thinking that they have to make. So I think really being proactive and going toward them as representatives, I think that is kind of our job and our role, is to make sure that we're saying to them, hey, we didn't really like what you were doing here. And I think that that's going to be the practical way to make sure that they communicate with us in the future.
All right, great. Now, aside from COVID-19, the other major change occurring on campus is the departure of President Barbara Snyder. What qualities do you think the university should look for in a new president, and how would you establish a relationship with this new president? Hunter, if you could go first.
Yeah, of course. So I think that there are a number of things that I would like to see in a new president. Probably first and foremost, I think that the new president of the university has to have that sense of humility. I think that we've seen, quite frankly, a little bit lacking in President Snyder. It's not very often that you see President Snyder amongst the students, interacting with the students. She very often kind of stays in Adelbert, and very rarely, when she comes to USG, it's like she's a regal presence almost. And I think that there are definitely benefits to that. I mean, she's taken very seriously and things of that nature. But I think that at this point in our university's history, we need to thank President Snyder for all that she's done, because she brought this university through a very, very rough time. And at the same time, I think that we can learn and say, all right, maybe someone who's a little bit more willing to interact with the students is something that we want to hear. I think also someone who is willing to listen, and in my opinion, comes from and this is not unique to, because President Snyder currently does, but I think we need someone who comes from a background that's going to help continue to break the STEM school kind of idea as to what Kass is. I think that we need somebody who is going to come and bring a prioritization of making sure that all of our humanities and that side of Euclid, because there's a very real barrier there, that side of Euclid feels valued in fundraising efforts and prioritization of funds and everything of that nature. I think that those are some of the key qualities, and I would add a list more, but I will stop.
All right, Joey.
Yeah, I would agree on all of those points. I think something important to note: when President Snyder arrived at our university, our acceptance rate was up at 70%. We were much, much more in debt than we were now. And the term I like to use, Matthew, is she was a wartime president. We brought President Barbara Snyder in as our wartime president while we were in war. The war is over. We can't have a wartime president anymore. This next president needs to be our peacetime president. They need to have a presence on campus. They need to be seen by the students. They need to be a part of our community in Cleveland. Hunter, you mentioned she's in Adelbert a lot. Sometimes a lot she's not even in Adelbert because she's not in Cleveland. Yeah. And I think we're at a really crucial point in our university's history where something like that can be so profoundly impactful on the next 10 years of Case Western Reserve. In terms of my relationship with the president of the university and USG's, I think quickly establishing a very efficient relationship has to be a priority. Because of what we've seen with all of these uncertainties and all this chaos, particularly in a pandemic, is that the USG's ability to connect with administrators to help students is one of its most powerful assets. And as the president, I would certainly make it a priority to establish a working relationship, not only with myself, but with all the vice presidents and the executive committee, so that we together can lead USG in a direction with the university president. Meeting with the president every month, I don't want to be just a regular routine thing where pleasantries are exchanged and nothing's accomplished. I want to go in with an agenda. I want to have bullet points of concerns of students, and I want to start and continue dialogue with this new president to meet the needs of the students that they present to their student government.
Are we allowed to, am I able to add to that and respond to that also?
Yes, you can.
Okay. And so, yeah, and I would additionally agree with all of those points. And I think that and another thing that we need to do is that very often historically, because of the fact that the president has very little time, I think this is just kind of the way I work. Anyone who knows me knows I'm a big food guy. I like cooking, I like baking, I like eating. It's the Italian.
You make a good steak.
Yeah, well, thank you. It's the Italian in me. But I think that a roundtable meal with the president, so that we all have our guards down, is something that we need to do right from the beginning. Not just me, all of the exec. And the other thing that I think that's very important is that Joey kind of hit on this. I think that we need to be making sure that especially for those first few meetings, that the only person who's having communication with the president is not me or Joey. I think we need to be making sure that we are hosting office hours specifically geared toward garnering student feedback to bring directly to the president. Very often, the concerns that are brought to the president are just internally gathered via USG. I think we need to have explicit office hours or explicit Zoom sessions or explicit forms, whatever the case may be, to submit agenda items for that meeting, so that it's not just USG that gets a voice as to what we're going to say to this new president.
So to follow up, Hunter, on what you mentioned about barrier between STEM and humanities, one thing that a lot of humanities programs in particular, but I'm sure that STEM programs are thinking of doing this as well, is creating new concentrations and majors. So for example, the history department is doing that next studies major. I know the English department is trying to, a journalism minor has been in the works for at least as long as I've been here.
Yeah.
So what do you think USG, and this is for you too, Joey, what do you both think USG's role is in assisting departments and students in creating these new concentrations and also hiring tenure track faculty for these positions?
Should I start or do you?
I had Joey start last time, so on.
Okay. So I actually serve, believe it or not, I currently serve on the Faculty Senate Committee for the Undergraduate Experiences Curriculum Committee, which, for those of you who don't know, actually approves all of the majors, the new majors for the university. So we just did the neurosciences major. This is public knowledge, but there will be a neurosciences major starting next year. We just approved it. So I think that, in my opinion, I think that considering that a member of USG or a student leader that is affiliated with USG sits on that committee, at least one, sometimes two, sit on that committee every year, I do think that we should be an active part in making those proposals. For example, now that I've been on this committee, and Manav Midha, who's one of the members of the finance committee, serves with me on the curriculum committee, and then I serve with Vidisha on the faculty senate committee on the undergraduate experience, which is called FISCU proper. I think that we should, I know what the faculty who approve these things, and luckily I get a vote also, I know what they're looking for, and whoever is serving on that committee knows what they're looking for. So I think that we should play an active part in that. The other thing that I think is key is, and this is something that I've been working on for a long time, I think that we need to redo how the university allocates its funding so that we can expand some of these programs. So for example, right now, as it stands, if you have a course and it's cross-listed in mathematics and, let's say, electrical engineering, the one that comes to mind is discrete math. A course that's cross-listed in 2 departments, that tuition is evenly split, regardless as to whether a math or an electrical engineering professor is actually teaching the course. And I think that's why we have a lot of problems on the humanities sides of things too, because the way the money flows is not consistent with who's actually teaching the course. So I think that if we have some of those funding issues if we start acting like one university in terms of the way we fund things, instead of acting as 2 separate institutions with different departments that are competing with one another, I think that we can help not only tell students and student leaders what they need to be putting into a major, but also all of the other things that are structural that are going to prevent them from actually getting that proposal passed in the first place, like cross-listing courses, for this example. So I think that USG should play a huge role. However, I will put an asterisk there, if the student who's making the proposal wants us to be part of it. Because what I don't think that USG should do is I don't think that USG should become involved in things that students do not want us involved in. I think that we should always be working to support rather than to dictate.
All right, Joey, if you'd like to respond.
Yeah, so I feel like this all begins in a place like where Hunter ended with feedback. We need to understand exactly what the student body desires in terms of these new majors and new programs. As for the new majors and new programs in principle, I'm all for them. I've always been a strong advocate that the biggest area of improvement that we can see in our university is in the humanities and the social sciences. And ironically enough, when we're talking about metrics and top lists, et cetera, if you see improvements in those, that's where you're going to see our climb. It's like the only difference between us and these other large universities, our STEM is essentially on par. Our research is top notch. It's these humanities and social sciences where we need so much more improvement to make us more equal to what the institutions we're often compared toward. In terms of how we're going to go about doing this, I think Hunter revealed to everyone probably the largest unknown problem in our university, and that it's decentralized. So when Kass was in financial hardship, it decentralized a lot of its capacity as a university. And because of that, you have individual colleges running their own ledgers. You have our access services, housing, dining, one-to-one fitness running its own ledger. You have Tinkham-Veal University Center running its own ledger against Twing. So nobody's working together, Matthew. How are we supposed to progress as a university when everyone's working for themselves? It can't work like that. And it's something I've had to try to fight time and time again as the chair of the allocations committee in terms of all the services that students have to pay. Like, how wrong is it that if you want to do something in the spot, you also have to pay $100 an hour just to use it? It's like, I already paid $60,000 to go here. And now I have to, like when Alex does the Sparty at the beginning of the year, USG has to pay just to use the facility. So it's how much money students have to pay. And it's also affecting what students get from the money they have to pay. The limited courses that we're having in our social sciences and our humanities. And it's this decentralized model that helped us for the short term, but we're now seeing is really, really hurting us in the long term. And the good news is, there is good news. The good news is we have a new provost, relatively new, and we're getting a new president. And Re-centralizing the university was one of the main reasons why 2 presidents before President Snyder was removed by the Faculty Senate, because it was too soon, too fast, and too much momentum going all at once. This process will most likely start and slowly, but continue to re-centralize our university. And I hope, as USG president, I can work with administration to pursue that. I can work with the Vice President of Academic Affairs on the Faculty Senate by providing that student voice. Like I said, those monthly meetings with the president are going to be so, so crucial to provide much more information than one individual can have. It's about the Vice President of Academic Affairs. It's about the USG Executive Committee. It's about our data from PR. There's so many factors that we need to gather together. And I'm confident we can, because the current government did a fantastic job with the over 2,200 submissions we got from the UDC USG survey. I'm looking at you, Hunter.
Thank you. But it's not just me, but thank you.
But I mean, if anything that this pandemic has proved to me is like the ability and capacity of Case Western Reserve University students. Like it's unbelievable how much work we're able to accomplish in such trying times, to be frank, that I as president, I want to lead USG to continue that kind of work, to pursue these kinds of transformative initiatives like re-centralizing our university and building up our humanities and social science programs.
All right, great. I only have one more question and then closing statements and open up to the floor. So last question, I think it's important to address this elephant in the room. We don't actually know when classes are going to be back on campus. There's the chance that online-only education may continue in the fall. How have you both considered how this possibility will impact your responsibilities? And if it does happen, how you try to improve the student experience if it's just Zoom, and what parts of your platform do you think are still applicable to that online-only fall semester?
Who's starting on this one?
Joey.
Well, that question made me sad. I think it made everyone in the room sad. I think I saw a tweet recently where it's like, I'm not even going to entertain talk about not returning to the fall because it makes me so upset. And it's true. I'm from South Florida. I miss Cleveland. I never think I'd ever say that. However, if we're not on campus, the student government still has to serve the students. And that, again, is the priority, students first. Now, how we're going to accomplish that will look different remotely. It'll look similar to now, although we'll have to continually make improvements upon that. Tenets of my platform that would remain the same, I have to go to community. And I feel like that's something that's been even lacking this semester is community. I mean, it sounds cheesy to say it out loud, but it's like, when I go to Case, and especially now that we're remote, it's like we need that Spartan pride back. We need that sense of community that we all still go to Case Western Reserve University back, not just a little Zoom code and you log on and you see your professor and then you log off. There has to be some sort of community built back up. Now, I've seen other universities build virtual student unions. Now, we can talk all day about how we want an actual student union, but in terms of being off campus, a virtual student union is something that I certainly want to pursue. Upholding the longstanding traditions. When I was president of the Upper Class Community Council and the Residence Hall Association, that was one of our biggest charges, was upholding all the traditions of UC that we had to continually serve with for all the residents. And I think as USG, we have to work with the organizations that already exist in our university, that already have framework in place for putting on these sorts of traditions, and working with them to deliver that to all of the students. Now, Hunter and I have both been running this emergency fund with our respective committees, the Allocations Committee and USG Finance Committee, and the VP Emeritus, she's here somewhere. Shout out to Sid. And that emergency fund has helped a lot of students with the issues that they've had to run into financially because of the university's response to this crisis. Now, the existence of, like we said, both Hunter and I agree on that we shouldn't have a perpetual emergency fund. However, there needs to be some sort of action taken in regards to the student activities fee, which is a part of not our tuition, but of our cost of attendance. And in speaking of costs, I feel that it would be very interesting for us to first get feedback from the student body and evaluate it both quantitatively and qualitatively as to where our prices are going to work, because $60,000 in Cleveland is very different than $60,000 here in Florida, which I think we can all agree from wherever we're respectively from. I'm also very concerned, Matt, even if we do return in the fall, there are a lot of students who are abroad that are going to have a lot of trouble getting visas to get back to Case. And that's why the provost has already directed faculty to make hybrid courses, both online and in person, for students that may not be able to get back. And so I think it's essential as a role of a student government to provide the resources in the community for those students who aren't able to return, should we be able to in the fall. Fingers crossed, everyone.
All right, Hunter?
Yeah, so basically at the crux of my platform is that we're all doing this together, that this is not necessarily a top-down administration. This is all of us working together. And for that reason, my platform basically would remain unchanged. So, and what I mean by that is this. From the perspective of humility, we still need to work on bringing USG to the students. That's something that we've gotten better at recently, but we still need to work on that. We still need to work with engaging with the Cleveland community. So for example, the whole reason why students are being moved out of their dorms in the current time is so that members of the Cleveland community who would be infected with coronavirus can come to live in our on-campus housing. Now, that was a very hard thing to milk out of the administration. They were not very clear with that as the actual purpose of what they were doing. But I think it's a very good thing that we're working with the Cleveland community, as long as it does not come at our own expense. It doesn't come at the students' expense. I think that the students would be more than willing to have a little bit of inconvenience if it helps others. I think that the student body is very generous with their time, talent, and resources. But I do think that when it gets to a point that somebody is entering your private abode without any sort of a forewarning, I think that gets to be a little bit of an issue. Strengthening relationships with other student organizations, that needs to keep going. That's really something that we have found during this time has been one of the strongest collaborations between the collaboration that Joey, the aforementioned collaboration that USG and UDC has been undergoing to collate all of these survey results. For context, Badisha and I will be going to tomorrow to Fiskview to talk about the new grading proposal. And collaborating with UDC made that possible. Collaborating with RHA on dining options this whole semester. That's something that really wasn't something that needed to be improved. It was something that needed to be improved, and we were there. You know, all of these different things, they will continue. Making the emergency fund protocols permanent, that's even gonna be more important. And now onto the last part. The thing that I think that you asked that I think is key and critical, and something that I know I've devoted a lot of my time to, is building that relationship. How do we know that we're one? So when this all started, when the emergency fund was basically just people emailing me and me using my USG credit card to buy things, when that was all that the emergency fund was, I actually had a student email me, and obviously I'm not going to reveal a name for this story, but that student was a Case student who was trapped in Bogota, Colombia, whose belongings were left in her dorm room, who was not going to be able to get back to Case. And myself, some of the administration, a few other student leaders, Marin, who's the current president, we were making sure that we were communicating with her on a near daily basis. And I wish that I say that we could have done more for her. We couldn't end up really doing that much with all of everything that's going on. We were able to get her some resources, but you know, times are hard for all of us. And I think that that's part of it. I think that making sure that even the least of us, and especially the least of us, are taken care of is going to be a key part of making sure that we are together as community. Of me taking my time, Joey taking his time, Sonia taking her time, all of us working together, taking our time, Jasmine, Alex, Navina, we've all been working hard on this, Sharon, everyone, to take our time and devote, and especially, and Joey goes without saying, to take our time to devote to other people. That's what community is. That is devoting our time and talents to other people. That's what community is. And the other thing is, I'm vice president of finance. We've got 200 clubs. If you want to talk about something that brings people together, it's our clubs and organizations. So I sent out an email the other day to all the club leaders telling them, prepare for a virtual student activities fair. What we're not going to do is we are not going to sacrifice some of the key things that bring people together to this virus. And if we can do those things in a different format, then I think that we're gonna build that crew community now more than ever. I think that one of the things, Matthew, I think that one of the key things is that because we're always so close to one another, sometimes we have the illusion that we're actually connecting. And I think now that we're all apart, it actually kind of gives us a new perspective that those relationships that we always took for granted while in person are all the more important now. And so I think that between clubs, between organizations, between connecting on that individual level, that's what's going to get us the community that we so are missing.
Great. Thank you so much for that answer. Now, I want to open up to the floor for questions. I know, Vidisha, you raised your hand in the Zoom chat. Would you like to go first? And I know Steph also sent me a message. So
my hand raising was actually an accident. I'm sorry about that.
Oh.
You were stretching.
So, all right, here's one question from Avi. At George Washington University, student government leaders have taken an active role in one of their students' fossil fuel divestment campaign by showing up to protests and lending support by way of their platform. How would you specifically use your platform to make sure the university administration is following through on and developing an adequate climate action plan, in addition to making sure the university's investments reflect its core values? Thank you for that question, Avi. So, Joey, if you want to go first.
Yeah, sure. Hi, Avi. Glad you could come. To speak to that, I actually met with Rich, who's the head of the Student Sustainability Council, which is an ad hoc committee within USG. And we had actually a very good conversation about essentially the same question. And where the answer begins is evaluating first of all, what we're going to have to deal with, and then we can figure out how we can accomplish that exact goal. Now, understanding that our university's investments are different than George Washington's, is that first of all, we have a new chief investment officer, and he's been very open to listening to students, much more so than the previous, which is good news for all of us. But furthermore, a lot of the university's investments actually rely in large fund accounts that we don't actually have the specific. So to explain it, we don't own a stock of ExxonMobil that we can just sell. We own a stock of a large fund that contains stocks of different fossil fuels companies. Now, divesting from those is certainly a lot more complicated, but not entirely impossible. Where that goes is, first of all, divesting, and then that's liquidating assets. What are we going to do with the cash? And the conversation that Rich and I had would actually be, it'd even be more interesting to not only call for that divestment, but call for investment in renewable resources and renewable energy companies. And so in terms of looking at our financial future, which for no one is bright right now, I'll be very frank, the stock market, our endowment is really hurting because of the stock market currently. However, I think it'd be interesting to look at reinvesting those in renewable energy companies, as well as Cleveland municipal bonds. I think we always talk about giving back to the community. There's no more stable investment, and there's no more better way to give back to a community than building bridges and roads with municipal bonds. And so the technicalities of which students are not usually involved in. However, I do think it'd be appropriate for the executive committee of USG, the president of USG, to meet with the president, the CFO, the CIO, whomever may be appropriate at the particular time, to talk about this sort of initiative. And just speaking as the chief judicial officer, in my experience with legislation in our student government, I think a really powerful, well-cited resolution would go very far. Now, I'm talking about lots of statistics, lots of data, and then ultimately ending with the exact question that you posed, Avi. I always admire the power that the student body is able to have behind resolutions where we have a lot of momentum and a lot of participation from. And I want it something that will last the 4 years that it currently is empowered to last, so that when it's renewed by its student government, they already have the resources available for them to either call for more divestment, or in the future that we both want to see, they won't have to anyway. I hope that answers your question.
Right.
I was on mute. Hunter? Yeah.
That's all right. Thank you very much, Matthew. Yeah, so hi, Avi. Avi is one of my students currently. So hello, Avi. So I'm a teaching assistant for ENGR 210. So a few different things about this particular question. I think that Joey did hit upon a key point right at the beginning that's important, is that the university typically does not invest in stocks. They invest in what are called ETFs, exchange traded funds. ETFs are big conglomerates. Now, those big conglomerates usually focus on a particular thing. So whether that be the energy industry or fossil fuel companies, whatever the case may be. So 2 things on that. I think, I'll be point blank, I think that it's the USG's job to enforce its resolutions. 4 years ago now, I believe it's 4 years ago, we passed a resolution saying that we were going to urge the university to divest from fossil fuels. I think that it's our job to continue to carry out that resolution, to continue to urge, to continue to meet with the chief investment officer until either that is satisfied, until we get to that point, or until that resolution no longer is in effect by the USG. Those are the only 2 things that we need, that we have at our, and that's, at the core of it, that's part of the reason why it's not explicitly in my platform, is because we passed a resolution on it. As far as I'm concerned, it's a question that the USG has already weighed in on, and we just need to follow that up with action now, including by cooperating with Sunrise, which is the group that Avi leads. So I think that one other thing that's important to note is that we have to make sure that we are showing that divesting from fossil fuels, and this I think is on the students, that divesting from fossil fuels isn't necessarily going to tank the endowment, and it won't necessarily. And the reason, and if anything, this last week, in which we've seen basically an oil trade war between Saudi Arabia and Russia, if anything, it shows that oil is not that great or stable of an investment in the first place, and fossil fuels more generally. So I think that that's something important to remember. I also do concur that we need to be investing in renewable energy. I mean, eventually, even if we kept all of our stock in oil, which I do not want, but even if we kept all of our stock in oil, eventually oil is going to run out. I mean, it's not a limitless supply. So eventually we're going, I'm an electrical engineer. That's kind of what we do. The whole thing that we do is we find new ways to generate and export energy. And there are issues with all of the renewables. Every single renewable has issues. But finding the companies that are investing in biofuels, that's one that's very exciting to me. Different nuclear options. Those are the ones that are going to take off once fossil fuels are no longer in the picture. So I think finding those companies, maybe some of them are unicorn companies, but finding those companies that exist currently and investing in them. And I also think that, I do think that a gradual approach is likely what the university will take. That's not something that I prefer, but at least working toward that goal and working toward the accomplishment of that resolution is something that I'm going to do. I'm not going to promise you that the university is going to divest based on my recommendation. That's not how really any of this works. But I promise you that I'm going to do all I possibly can to enforce our resolutions, lest USG not have any credibility at all.
Great, thank you so much, both of you. Now, I know there's one more student question from Steph before we go into that, I just want to make one last comment just based on those two things. So just kind of back up what both you guys are saying. So a Hopkins study recently actually showed that divesting from fossil fuels doesn't actually hurt your bottom line endowment, mainly because most funds don't beat an index anyway. So there's that. And also, yeah, USG, I think you mentioned or alluded to it, but USG did pass a bill asking for divestment from fossil fuels into about 6 years ago, and then it was blocked by administration. So it's also a question of how USG stuff turns into change. But anyway, Steph, your question.
Yeah, my question is specifically for Joey. I know that there's been some like bad standing with like past organization that you had been involved in, namely RHA. And I just had some questions about how you believe this, like how you've grown from this lapse of commitment, and like how you plan on working fairly with organizations in the future as USG president.
Would you be able to provide more specifics?
I believe you were voted out of RHA by your community council committee for not fulfilling your commitment.
Could they ask?
I'm really just like getting this from a text.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I'm just trying to read and speak.
No, you're good.
And I'm not very good at it. Yeah, can you just elaborate on kind of like what happened and like how you believe that you've grown from it and how like you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for your question, Seth. So my tenure in RHA was I was president of the Upper Class Community Council for 1 year, which I served to full term. And then the following year, I was voted as the representative for the Stephanie Tubbs Jones Residence Hall, which is where I've lived the past 2 years. And so in my capacity as STJ rep, when the council was formed, the meetings were not at a time when I said I was able to commit to, and that I was still able to go to general body meetings. And given my history and experience with UCK, given my, actually I prepared all the transitioning documents for UCK as well, and its budget system that it used with the help of actually Manon Dunbar, who used to be the treasurer over in UDC. I understood that my voice and my role in UCK was not nearly as essential as it was in the general body. The general body, first of all, has a far greater budget than UCK, and the general body also votes on very, very sorts of different things than UCK. As a matter of fact, UCK typically doesn't really vote on anything, they just program. And like I mentioned earlier, they program a lot of very important traditions, but the good thing about traditions is that they're already established. There's already a framework for it. And so when I had to make that tough choice of should I completely resign from RHA because I can't go to the UCK meetings, or should I continue to serve STJ in the general body weekly, I chose the latter of the two. And that was something, I regret that I wasn't able to attend those meetings, but working with their vice president of programming, as well as their vice president of marketing, and the general body, I still feel that the missions that RHA stands for as a programming and partly advocacy body were still able to be met through the general body, and I'm very thankful that I was able to voice my experience with the organization in the general body for the time in which I was a part of the organization.
If I could say one brief thing, I don't really know anything about Joey's time in RHA, but I do know about his time working on the emergency fund. And I know that during that time that he's worked all hours of the day trying to make it work. I know that he's done a lot of good to try to raise money for the emergency fund. I know that he's done a lot of good trying to make sure that students have all that they need. That's who I know Joey to be. I don't know about his time at RHA, but I can definitely speak to his time here with the SEC committee and all that he does and all that the emergency fund does. And I appreciate his cooperation and support.
All right, thank you so much, Steph, for that question. And anyway, if we could have some brief closing statements. I wish we had more time for student questions, but we've already been talking for about 45 minutes, which is longer than I expected, but hey, that's a sign of good debate. So anyway, Hunter, if you want to go first.
Yeah. So really, I don't have too much to add. I think that a lot of key points were brought up here in this debate. I think a number of different things were touched upon that are important. One thing that I really think that we need to do is when we're looking forward, when we're going forward, we need to know that we're not always going to know which problems have our attention. We're not always going to know which challenges we're going to have to face. But we definitely always need to know which challenges we're going to face with what strategy. And so that's kind of where my platform comes in. When I'm talking about humility and efficiency and openness and communication, these are the ways that we can go forward together to make sure that we're addressing whatever problem comes our way. You know, in these last 3 years of serving on USG, it's not always been easy. It's not always been peaceful. The one thing that I always say to my committee, and this is the one thing that we often close with, is that it's a meditation or a prayer, however you want to say it, is grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change, right? The courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And that's kind of become the finance committee's statement or meditation of this semester. And I think that that's really going to be what I bring to this role, and what I bring to this perspective is we have to have the serenity to accept the things that we cannot change. We can't change the coronavirus. We can't change if we're apart, if we're separated by oceans because of the fact that students aren't going to be able to get a visa to get back into the United States. We can't change that. But we can have the courage to make sure that our community is together in whatever way we can, even if it has to be over Zoom. And I think we all need the wisdom to know the difference between the two. So whatever the case may be, we'll go forward together and do it kind of as was outlined.
Right,
thank you very, very much. And thank you very much for hosting this debate, Matthew. I appreciate it.
Next, Joey, and then we're going to talk to the candidate for VP of Student Life.
Right. So I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Observer for hosting this forum for debate, those currently in office in the USG, and most importantly, everyone listening in on today's debate here and on YouTube when Matt posts it after he edits it nice and well. In this year's undergraduate student government elections, for all the positions running, there is a right choice. And that answer is to vote. If you have an opinion, you have to vote. It is essential to maintaining our democracy and vital to any hopes of improving the crew experience for each other. I ask everyone listening here today, as the president's portion of tonight comes to a close, please vote for yourself, for your friends, and for your community. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you for that message.